that
it's
Ukraine
unbelievable.
was
We have in the Oval
behind it all
Office a surrogate for the Russian disinformation.
Casey Hunt is apparently wired up and able to talk to us. Casey, here we are. This is, again, just the pregame hour prior to the Senate getting gavelled into order at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And again, it's during this hour that we have news we're scrambling to react to and wondering how many of the 100 senators will be briefed up and current on this, because it can't be more timely given what they're about to embark on. What are you hearing, Case?
Well, Brian, that's just it. I mean, this is breaking up here on the same timeline as what you guys are hearing, and it could not come at a more pivotal moment as they are trying to figure out what happens next in this impeachment trial. This is the kind of bombshell that Mitch McConnell has been afraid of all the way along. We had one on Sunday night. His conference, panicked. He was able to contain it. He tried to move everything along as fast as possible after that. Once he was able to contain that panic, he did work, I think, to put a little bit of space in between the actual scoop and this vote that we're now expecting today. Suddenly, there is new information that involves Pat Cipollone, who's been down on the floor of the Senate, making these arguments, actually being in a room where supposedly some of this happened, not to use the now very overused phrase from the musical, and of course the title of John Bolton's book. But essentially Bolton is alleging that Pat Cipollone is one of the people who was in the room and bore witness himself to the president doing this, what they have been defending him against on the floor for the last 2 weeks. So that is quite something. And, as Garrett was reporting, we're still waiting on Lisa Murkowski. If she decides to side with Romney and Collins, then we're in that 50-50 scenario where we don't expect John Roberts to break a tie. But suddenly, with this new information hanging out there, that seems like a weightier move. You also potentially have the timeline here being stretched out. We're now hearing, we're still in the early stages of reporting this out, but we now have aides telling our Capitol Hill team that it's possible this could stretch to Wednesday of next week because people are interested in hearing closing arguments. I'm still sorting through that reporting and touching base with my sources to figure out exactly what that means. It's possible it's as serious as a real possibility. It's also possible it's a trial balloon because, frankly, Democrats likely have more control over the timeline here. If they want to try to drag this out for a few more days, perhaps Republicans thinking, oh, well, the 2020 presidential candidates will throw a fit if we suggest that they could be here through the weekend and into early next week. The White House, of course, not interested in seeing this drag out past the State of the Union, which is scheduled for Tuesday night. That would put a real cloud over the president as he comes up here to Capitol Hill. So between this scoop, the uncertainty on the timing, not knowing where Lisa Murkowski stands, a lot of eyes on the Chief Justice, things are incredibly uncertain right now, Brian. And it's very different than even when we left the Capitol last night under the impression Republicans were going to move very quickly to try to wrap this up.
So it's possible that even McConnell thinks it would be too gross to wrap this thing up tonight, cut to Sean Hannity, victory lap interview with the president during the Super Bowl pregame, and then the president walking down the aisle for the State of the Union?
So, Brian, what I would say is that I think Mitch McConnell wants to wrap this up as soon as possible, and I think that's going to be even more true after this New York Times story. I have to do some more reporting with his office on this story. I haven't put that question directly to them, so I don't want to speak for them yet on this, but I think he has always been in the position of wanting to wrap this up as soon as possible. The question is, where is his conference? Does his conference balk at this new information? Because Mitch McConnell can't do anything if his conference isn't behind him. So that is really the only thing that matters, which means, my question is, A, does this affect Lisa Murkowski and throw us into a more uncertain 50-50 situation? And B, I think there was a lot of pressure from McConnell's office to get people to go on the record on their witness vote so that this all would seem a little bit more certain heading into it. We're going to have to, I think, ask, and probably are already asking. I mean, I'm backed up by a huge, amazing team here on the Hill who I'm sure is watching, running after all of these senators as you and I are talking, to figure out if there's anybody that might feel as though they want to change their vote. It's harder, and I think one of the reasons McConnell was pushing people to put their statements out there, it's harder to back off something when you've already been out there publicly saying, okay, I'm going to do X. And so Lamar Alexander said last night, I'm going to vote no on additional witnesses. It's much harder to back away from that than it might have been had that still been a big open question.
Okay.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.